Coming up on Phillies Nation, presented by BQ Basement Systems, David Murphy of the Philadelphia Daily News joins Pat and Corey to discuss what could happen with the Phillies before the July 31st deadline. Natalie catches up with Phillies broadcaster Matt Stairs, who gives her some pointers on hitting. Tommy Green joins us on the mound, and I've got the batter's inbox questions. That's all ahead on Phillies Nation.
Welcome, folks. It is the latest Phillies Nation, and he is Corey Seidman. I'm Pat Gallen. We're here at Scheib Vintage Sports, 13th and Walnut in Center City, and the show, of course, brought to you by BQ Basement Systems. We're also joined by our friend from the Philadelphia Daily News, baseball columnist Dave Murphy. Dave, thanks for hanging out.
I'm thrilled.
I bet you are, because we're going to talk about the Phillies for this first segment and the trade deadline to come and what could be to come with this team. Now, last season they had an opportunity to sell off some of their parts. They decided to bring guys back like Chase Utley. Carlos Ruiz is still here on a long-term contract. But what do you think the difference could be in this trade deadline as opposed to last?
A greater sense of futility for the future, I think. This is the third straight year now that this will be a non-playoff team unless something miraculous happens. And, even the most optimistic among folks in the front office, I don't think can ignore this kind of reality. You heard Ruben Amaro Jr. in the offseason say, I'm a little more bullish on this team than a lot of people. Well, I think he was probably wrong, and I think he probably realizes that, and I think that will be the driving factor behind. Last year they still talked themselves into believing that there was some hope for this year.
I think the reason that you will see more selling this year as opposed to last year is that, again, we're seeing that there are so many fewer sellers with the two wild card format. I mean, if you think about it around the league right now, who would the sellers be? A team like the Phillies, the Cubs, the Diamondbacks, but nobody else in the NL is out of it, and few teams in the AL are out of it. So from that standpoint, the Phillies should be able to get some decent parts for the players that they do sell off. And another factor is that guys like Carlos Ruiz, guys like Chase Utley now are under contract for more years than they were last year. If they were dealt last year, they would have been rental players. Not the case this year.
That's a good point. Let's talk about some of those individual players and what they might be able to garner by trading them. And we can start at the top with Chase Utley, Jimmy Rollins, and I know that they have the 10-5 rights. It's not going to be that easy to trade these guys, but if they were to possibly try and sell them off, what do you think they could get for them?
I mean, if either one of those players were to okay a deal, I'm pretty sure they would be top of the market. I mean, you're talking, a couple prospects, one blue chip prospect, and maybe a middle level prospect. A lot would have to do, with the finances of whatever team is acquiring these guys. A team like let's say Pirates might not be willing to take on Rollins' option year for next year. So there's all that haggling. But I do think that the Phillies have a stable of players who would be probably the prime targets on the market, and I think you're looking at, you better be hoping for something at least equivalent to what Hunter Pence got. You would want more than that, obviously, and hopefully they would be the right players this time.
I can't imagine there's going to be a player on the trade market with more value than Chase Utley because he plays a premium position. He's having an MVP caliber season, still hitting .320 with an OPS near 1,000. So Utley's going to command a lot on the free agent market and in the trade market. And I also think that the way that his contract is laid out also makes him appealing because he's only due $10 million next season. Yeah. And then after that, he has a trio of $15 million options that only vest if he gets 500 plate appearances per season. So an acquiring team, a team like the Oakland Athletics, for example, that need a second baseman, that would be a very appealing contract for them. Just $10 million next year with a chance to make it a 4-year deal.
Yeah, I mean, the big question is, will these guys waive their 10-5 rights? You saw the Cubs spend 2 or 3 seasons trying to get rid of Alfonso Soriano. It's weird to look at it, and I don't know that there's a parallel exactly to the Sixers and the tank, but the ideal situation for the long-term future of this franchise is for things to get so miserable over the next couple of months that all of these guys are willing to leave town. Otherwise, Ruiz and Marlon Byrd might be your most easily dealt commodities.
One guy that might not be so easy to move is Cliff Lee. Now, we know that he's a hell of a pitcher, but He's coming off the injury. The elbow problem might set him back a little bit and might cause some teams to pause before trading for him. There's another guy that if they decide to move on from him and if he decides that he's willing to move on, he's got a big contract, but he can definitely get you, if healthy, a pretty good nut in return.
Right. Well, the problem is that Cliff Lee, when he returns, it might only be 3 or 4 starts that he pitches before the trade deadline. And is a team going to be willing to not only part with prospects, but pay that salary for Cliff Lee when they don't even know that in the second half of the season he's going to be a healthy ace? I don't know if that's going to happen. Unfortunately, it kind of looks like the Jonathan Papelbon situation last year where the Phillies' most tradable asset floundered and didn't allow them to trade him.
Right.
Yeah, I just don't see Cliff Lee
wanting to go?
No, I see him wanting to go. I don't see anybody wanting to deal for him because, again, you're talking about variables like, 60-some million dollars left on his $30-some million left on his contract. That's tough to take on even if the guy's healthy, when a guy's 35, 36. This is a 35, 36-year-old with now an elbow problem. No team is going to give up prospects and take on money if there's a chance they can be made a fool of when his elbow blows up in August.
Also true. How about some of the lower tiered guys like an A.J. Burnett, Carlos Ruiz? I mean, these guys, again, Burnett just signed a 2-year deal. Ruiz is in the midst of a 3-year contract. It's not going to be easy to trade these guys off. It's really tough.
No, and I think that their best course of action might be to package some of these guys. I thought last year was the year to trade Chase Utley. I thought last year was the year to trade maybe not Cliff Lee, but some of these other guys. I think that while a team might not take on Jonathan Papelbon's salary because of maybe some of his velocity, what if you said, all right, we'll give you Ruiz and Papelbon, and maybe throw in an Antonio, if you're talking fire sale, if you package these guys, you could send 2. You have enough players where you could send 2 or 3 to a team.
Because of Bastardo on his own, it's not going to be worth anything.
You could change. You could really change some teams. Like what? I mean, let's say Jeter gets hurt, and you go to the Yankees and say, "We'll give you Chase Utley and Jimmy Rollins." What's that worth?
I don't think they're turning that down.
I think they need to think outside the box, like the Red Sox did. I think that Red Sox-Dodgers trade might be. There could be some potential there for that this year.
And just real quick, that Ruiz-Papelbon comment about packaging them, that's a great point because Ruiz on his own might not command a ton in return. Papelbon on his own with all the money he's owed might not command a lot in return, but if you're getting a closer and a starting catcher who commands a pitching staff better than anybody else in baseball, I'm pretty sure you're going to get a lot for that.
All right, the magic question might be, what's the magic number? How far out do they have to be? I mean, let's say it's mid-July, which it really starts to heat up once you get into July. 5 games, 7 games, because they were reluctant last year when they were in that 5-game range or so. They didn't want to sell off parts. This year might be a little bit different, but is there a magic number?
I think they've already reached their magic number. I think it's more about them knowing what kind of team that they have. It's about self-awareness. They could make a little mini run and close it within 3 games under 500. I still don't think anyone in that front office is going to say, look, we're going to make the playoffs, and if we do make the playoffs, we're going to win a series. Right. I think there's a bit of self-awareness this year, and unless, again, you're talking about, they would have to be over 500 for them to even think about not selling, I would think.
I'd say 5 to 7 games, what they are right now. If they're that far under 500, that's the magic number because the Phillies haven't had a 4-game winning streak all season. They haven't been 2 games over 500 since the last few days of 2012, and they wasted probably their best opportunity to make some headway in the NL East with the Nationals and the Braves scuffling these first 2 months. Those are probably going to be the worst 2 months of those teams' seasons, and the Phillies still weren't able to pick up ground.
He is David Murphy from the Philadelphia Daily News. Dave, we appreciate the time.
Appreciate you having me.
We're coming right back here on Phillies Nation. Natalie is with Matt Stairs. Don't go anywhere.
Natural.
So you're back here in Philadelphia, just about 5 years after you won the World Series with the team, only this time you're in a different role as the broadcaster. What made you decide that you wanted to get into broadcasting?
Well, I don't think there's really anything that got me involved in it. I actually did some pregame and postgame for the Red Sox a few years ago with Nesson, and I was just sitting at home, getting ready for the Wing Bowl, and then I got the phone call to come down and do an interview for it. And I thought it was a great opportunity, something I was excited for. Never thought I'd ever get it because I've never done this before. I went in, did the interview, and it worked out well, and so I had a good time at the Wing Bowl, and I got hired. Well, you got the balance down, you got the swing down. Now we just need to get you the stride down because your left foot has not moved yet.
What made you want to work in Philadelphia? You had been on 12 different teams, right? 12?
Yeah.
Yeah, 12 different teams. So what made you decide to want to come back here?
Well, I think it's pretty easy. I had some offers to do some other places. World Series champion.
Yeah.
The home run, HK's last call. The short time that I was here, a lot of things happened, and it's just, going 0 for 32 in 2009 and no one booing me, knowing that when the playoffs come around, you're going to do something special. So there was just that special, special click with the fans in Philadelphia, and made the decision very easy when they offered me 109 games to do TV and travel with the team, and basically cover a team that I absolutely love. You're hitting like Ty Cobb.
Co-ed teams looking for me. I know you probably get this question a lot, but what was that like in that moment when you hit that ball?
Oh, in the NLCS.
Yeah, Game 4.
Game 4 NLCS. 3-1 pitch from Broxton. I don't remember. No. It was something you'll never forget, and it's because that was my first at bat in about 8 days. So I sat around and the home run was hit by Victorino. The crowd got a little quiet. Chooch hit the base at the left field, and all of a sudden they brought Broxton in. And he's given up 1 home run the whole year versus a left-hander. So then all of a sudden this place went dead. I was in a happy spot. I was on deck taking my practice swings, and he was coming in playing his music, I guess. I didn't hear nothing. And to see the first pitch come in, I thought, a really good chance, because it was slow motion, probably 89, 90 miles an hour. And you look up, it's 97. So everything was in slow motion. And the next pitch was a slider down and in, which set my bat up because it's a slider, the back foot for a left-hander, where we usually swing at. And I took it. And I'm like, okay, something could happen here. That's pretty special. All of a sudden, 3-1, and the moonshot was out, and it was just something that it was amazing.
Thank you, Natalie. Some great stuff there with Matt Stairs and Corey and Pat back here at Scheib Vintage Sports in Center City. And we go to a segment that we call By the Numbers. Some great stuff, not great baseball over the weekend between the Phillies and the Mets, but there were some great stats that came from it, and it starts here. 3rd time in the Phillies' history that batters struck out 15 or more times in a game and did not walk. The last time that happened, 1984, also against the New York Mets.
That's that vaunted Mets pitching staff, I guess.
It's ugly, it's ugly. Also some more, it's the first time the Phillies and the Mets played 3 straight extra inning games in the history of their matchups.
And none of those games were crisp. All extra inning games, 1-run games, and none of them were crisp.
10+ hours between the 2 games. Also, Mets and Phils, first teams to play 3 straight games against each other, with all 3 going 11+ innings since 1991. It was the Blue Jays and the Mariners. That's from ESPN Stats and Info there. Ugly. Just awful. What do you have on Ryan Howard and Antonio Bastardo?
Well, going back to last week, Antonio Bastardo, not in the Mets series, but in the last game of that Rockies series, which Ryan Howard walked the Phillies off after Mike Adams held Colorado earlier in that inning against Carlos Gonzalez and Troy Tulowitzki. Bastardo got himself into a mess. A third of an inning, 4 walks, didn't allow a run. That was actually the 3rd time in the history of baseball, just the 3rd time ever, that a pitcher has gotten no more than 1 out, walked at least 4, and not allowed a run.
That's not good.
Antonio Bastardo continues to put himself in messes. His ERA is only 3.86 on the season because other relievers are cleaning up his mess. But the other one is that Ryan Howard, who homered a bunch of times last week, he had 4 homers and 14 RBIs over his last 7 games after Sunday. All of Howard's homers this year have been meaningful. Yeah. They haven't been these like homers you see in a 12-5 game that have no bearing on the game. Of Howard's 11 home runs, 9 of them have been with runners on base. Okay. He has 6 2-run homers and 3 3-run homers, which is pretty impressive. I mean, he's doing his best work when it matters most. 8 of the 11 home runs have come when the Phillies are trailing or leading by no more than 2 runs. So 8 of the 11 have been in close games, 9 of the 11 have been with runners on base, and that explains why he's toward the top of the league in RBIs despite hitting below 230.
All right, let's go to our fantasy baseball segment. It's brought to you by DraftStreet.com. It's the future of fantasy sports if you didn't know. DraftStreet.com. Go there. The promo code is Phillies Nation, you can sign up for a free one-day fantasy league. We didn't have any guys last week to screw you guys over, so we're going to go with two fresh players. Who do you have?
I have Adam Lind of the Toronto Blue Jays, who is hitting .357 on the season after Sunday and is in just a stellar Blue Jays lineup right now, hitting behind Jose Bautista and Edwin Encarnacion. That's the highest scoring offense in either league. The Blue Jays have won something like 16 of their last 20 games. Lind has been a key part of it, and if you lost Prince Fielder, for example, at first base, or if you don't have Billy Butler performing, Adam Lind's a good waiver wire pickup.
Another possible first baseman. How about Mike Napoli, the Boston Red Sox? 73% he's only owned in Yahoo leagues. A lot of people were dropping him because of the injury, but he's going to be back soon. And that Red Sox offense, when it gets hot, they can put up a lot of runs. That's it for the Fantasy Baseball segment. It's brought to you by DraftStreet.com. Visit DraftStreet.com. Use promo code PhilliesNation. Pat and Corey coming right back after this.
Welcome back to Phillies Nation, presented by BQ Basement Systems. It's time for our Batter's Inbox questions, where the guys debate your question and I'll pick the winner. Ready?
Let's go.
All right. Let's go. Our first question asks, 2 months in, what has been the most surprising storyline from the Phillies? Pat?
I think it's absolutely Dominic Brown. He's been hovering around 200 all season, no power whatsoever, and that's after 27 home runs last year. I know that he had a hot first half, but you're thinking after you saw the season that he had, he would take the next step forward, and he really hasn't done that. If anything, he's regressed completely. The defense still isn't there. It's so-so. The base running, he's made a lot of blunders on the bases this year. And again, a 200 average, it just isn't going to do it because they needed him to be a middle-of-the-order type of power bat, and he hasn't been able to give them that at all. So I think it's Dominic Brown's struggles this year.
Pat went micro, I'm going to go macro. I'm going to say that the biggest surprise to me is that everything we heard this offseason, none of it's come true. You heard that if Ryan Howard had power, the Phillies would contend. He's on pace for 33 and 117, still 6 games under through Sunday. Chase Utley's hitting .320. Jimmy Rollins has the highest on-base percentage of his career. Carlos Ruiz has a .403 on-base percentage, and yet the Phillies are still struggling, not making up any ground in the NL East, and we've seen that this team, even when the key guys, the key 35-year-old veterans are performing, they don't have enough. To me, that's a huge surprise because I would have thought that if all these guys were producing and Mike Adams also keeping games in check in the 8th inning of games for Jonathan Pavlon, I think they were much better than 24 and 30 through Sunday.
As much as I agree with you, I'm going to have to go with Pat.
All right, I'll take it. 1 point for me.
All right. Our next question asks, should the Phillies have kept Bobby Abreu out of spring training? Corey?
Yeah, I didn't agree when they cut him, and I'm not just saying that because he killed the Phillies over the weekend. I'm saying that because the Phillies all season have lacked a left-handed bat off the bench who has patience and power. Bobby Abreu, in his worst days, can still run a 3-2 count against a reliever, a young reliever. Like when Bobby Abreu was facing the Phillies this weekend, for example, when he faced the Phillies' young relievers, when he faced the Phillies' starting pitchers, he made everybody work. And he showed that he still has gap power. He's shown that all year with the Mets, and it was a little disappointing that the Phillies didn't keep him. I understand he can't play defense, but the Phillies bench did not have any power whatsoever the first 2 months of the season. He certainly would have helped.
I'm going to disagree. Absolutely not. Bobby Abreu is 41 years old, and while you bring up some good points about his bat still being alive, you mentioned defense. He can't play any defense, and that has been a problem already with Dominic Brown in one spot and Darren Ruff playing the outfield occasionally as well. Look, they could have gotten the same kind of batter, albeit from the other side, in Darren Ruff if they decided to keep him, because especially if you platoon with Dominic Brown, that could have been the easy way out of it, and they didn't want to go that route. They've since dropped Darren Ruff back to AAA, so it's been kind of a mess in the outfield. But no, Bobby Abreu was not going to give you enough to warrant a spot because he can only play twice a week, 3 times tops. That's not enough.
I guess you did your homework because you're going to win this one.
Right. I like
Sorry,
it.
Corey.
And we go to the last question with a winner. I love it.
All right. Our last question asks, over the last 10 years, who has been baseball's most underrated player? Corey?
Going to Adrian Beltre. Adrian Beltre over the last 10 years is at 293. The last 5 years he's at 313, averaged 26 homers a year, and he's been by far the best defensive third baseman in baseball. So Adrian Beltre never gets mentioned with the superstars, but to me he's a superstar because he does it all. And again this year hitting 300 for a depleted Texas Rangers team. I can't think of anybody over the last decade more underrated than Adrian Beltre.
I would say Adrian Beltre is properly rated. But one guy I think is underrated is Paul Konerko from the Chicago White Sox. You never hear about this guy, and you haven't, and now he's at the end of his career, and he's going to retire after the season. But in his prime, 2004 through 2008, he was hitting 35, 40 home runs. He's got 6 30 home run seasons, 439 home runs in his career. I bet you didn't know that. I think it's Paul Konerko for sure.
Yeah, first baseman though.
Well, Corey, you're going to win that argument.
Good.
All right, fine, but I won overall, so.
I'm winning on the year though.
Tied.
tied. Is that right? I'll win eventually. One of these days.
Well, that wraps up our Batter's Inbox questions for this week. If you want to hear what Pat and Corey have to say, leave them for us on our Facebook and Twitter page. Don't touch that remote. We're right back with more Phillies news.
Hi, I'm Tommy Green. Today we're going to talk about the different types of off-speed pitches: curveball, slider, changeup, and split. I'll start with the split because Jonathan Papelbon throws that a little bit. People call it a split finger, they call it a fork ball or whatever. It all depends on how you hold it. This it's held like this a little bit where it comes out and it tumbles down like this. Papelbon's got a real good one. I threw a slider. Predominantly, which is held off-centered, and you pull down through the ball, staying behind and on top of it with your fingers, and the ball comes out like that. You can see the rotation start to come if you see it like that. Curveball, you can spike it, or you can hold it like this. The key to it is throw it, pretend it's a fastball. You got to think fastball, and turn it at the end. It spins and comes across. That's some of the off-speed pitches that are thrown today in baseball.
Thank you, Tommy Green. Always insightful from the mound. Pat and Corey here with you, and we wrap it up with our Twitter trivia question. Use the hashtag PNTrivia on Twitter for this. We didn't have one last week, so no answer. And here's the question this week, and it's a good one, I think, because I came up with it. Through Sunday, Carlos Ruiz had an impressive .403 on-base percentage. Since 2004, so the last 10 seasons with the Phillies, which player had the highest on-base percentage in a single season? And tell us what year it was.
So higher than 403 then?
Yes.
It's a great question because I think of a couple of guys that come to mind, but I don't think they had high enough batting averages to be above 403 on base percentage-wise, so I'm curious to see what the answer is.
Interesting. It's a very interesting answer as well, so leave it for us at Phillies Nation on Twitter, and the hashtag is PNTrivia. Well, that's it for us. Thank yous all around. Thank you to Dave Murphy for hanging out with us from the Philadelphia Daily News. Thank you to Matt Stairs, Phillies broadcaster, for hanging out with Natalie and everyone else involved. 2020, Brian Michael. Thank you to Ryan. Thank you, Corey. I am Pat Gallen. That's it for Phillies Nation this week. We will talk to you soon.